All right. Welcome. 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 Let's start this market breakdown. I'm going to be doing a full market breakdown. Market breakdowns will be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I will also keep you updated for the next stream on the previous stream. Somewhere around market close in between 5:30 and 6:30. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So let's get it started. What do we have? We have BTC USD. And on Bitcoin, we are retesting and approaching previous structure resistance, now acting as support. That should act as support. So if we drop down on the weekly, we do have a weekly going off of the last breakdown. We wanted to see a little more retracement on the weekly before we started to see the move to the downside. But if we do look at the daily, we did get a nice and easy move pushing to the downside, creating an impulse. If we get some sort of retracement, we'll be able to apply the TMCP1 strategy to this. But once again, we are coming into an area of previous structure resistance that should now act as support. And I don't expect much of an explosion, but some sort of rejection from this area is to be expected. Remember, the halving event won't happen until 2024, which is when Bitcoin should be expected to make an explosion to the upside. With so many cryptos in cold storage removed from the markets and exchanges, we will see a halving event with less amount of Bitcoins in availability. So with all of those Bitcoins that are taken off of the exchanges, when it hits the halving event, they'll all be doubled, which would supply a shock to the market in 2024 during the halving event that should explode price to the upside. So let's go over gold, XAU, USD from the monthly time frame. From the monthly, what can we identify is that we are coming into structure support. We've had previous structure support multiple times in this area, and a rejection from this area should be expected. On the weekly, what do we want to see? We want to see price is starting to make a double bottom right in this area. So we know after a double bottom, a rejection higher is to be expected. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, we can see we are starting to make moves to the upside after we are failing to create lower lows in this area. But first, since we are so bearish, we would need to see structure broken to the upside with this previous structure support broken before we start to look for any possible setups for longing opportunities. Now, if we jump over to silver, on silver, we were rejecting previous structure support to the downside. Now we are at previous structure resistance. That should now act as support. So we should see some sort of rejection out of this area as well. And that's on the monthly. On the weekly, we've created this M formation where we know we want to see a completion at the neckline. Dropping down to the daily time frame, we are starting to make and break structure to the upside. So a completion up at this neckline should be expected. We can hop over to platinum. Platinum from the monthly, XPT USD. We are rejecting previous support. That's now acting as support once again. Looking to come back and retest previous structure resistance. That should now act as resistance once again, but we are making moves to the upside. If we drop to the weekly, we can see that we got rejected from this area, failing to create a lower low. So creating a double bottom. After a double bottom, we should expect prices to go higher. If we look at it from the daily time frame, you can see we are starting to approach some structure resistance, supply and demand areas right in this area where we do want to see some sort of reaction. Now, based off of the last breakdown, we wanted to see a move to the upside and some sort of retracement before we start to get long. But from here, we could possibly either see the retracement come from this area, and then we could have a possible inverted head and shoulders with the left shoulder here, head, and a right shoulder where we don't want to see the right shoulder break and close below the left shoulder for further movement to the upside. Or we could possibly get just more bullishness to the upside where we see a retracement, and then look for the continuation as well. Dropping down to US oil from the monthly. From the monthly, we are right at previous structure, resistance, downturn support, and once again on the monthly time frame, we still have 23 days until this candle closes. So even though it is starting to break below the structure area, we would not like it to see break below. This could just be a creation of a wick. But if we look at the weekly, we can see that we are starting to break below this area. If we do get a close below this area and we hop down to the daily time frame, some sort of retracement back into structure, previous structure support would be ideal before we see the continuation to the downside. But if we're looking for a move to the upside, we would need to see it break all this structure first before we start to look for any longing opportunities. And if we do go to Euro USD from the monthly time frame, we are pushing to the downside quite aggressively. Spoke about it in the last market breakdown. The overall target we like to see the market hit is down in here. It doesn't necessarily have to make it all the way down there, because if we look at the monthly time frame, we are starting to create an M formation. So we've had a move up, move back down, breaking down below structure. We know after an M formation, we want to see the pattern completed at the neckline, and that puts us in a situation to be in a perfect impulse retracement and impulse situation where we can see the move to the downside for further continuation. But on the weekly, we do have an M formation and price is starting to push to the upside. So right around this area on the daily time frame, we do have a daily sort of triple bottom in this area where we failed to break and close below the low. So we could see prices move to the upside for a little relief. On the daily, we are starting to break above some structure. We would still need to see a price kind of get a little more bullish if we drop down to the 4-hour time frame, a little more bullish if we did happen to get a retracement, and then the creation of a move to the upside. We could possibly look for the continuation back up for the weekly M pattern to complete itself before the continuation to the downside on the daily. Now if we go down to GBP USD, on GBP USD, we are pushing to the downside quite aggressively, but we are coming into some previous structure lows, which we could expect some sort of rebound or retracement. On the weekly, we are extended, and with this weekly candle, we are currently making moves to the upside. We still have about 2 days left for this candle to close on the weekly, but on the daily, you can see that we're failing to break lower, kind of finding a double bottom in this area, starting to reject to the upside. So we would still need to see some more bullishness before we start to go ahead and look for the move of the weekly M formation to complete itself back up in this area. We can slide down to AUD USD, which is pushing to the downside quite aggressively. This month we have broken below the structure support. On the weekly, we are pushing down quite aggressively as well. Jumping back to the previous market breakdown, we wanted to see some sort of weekly retracement that would have us in a weird head and shoulders pattern, but it would be some structure here that would provide the safety and the confidence and the confluence for us to see a move to the downside. But prices started to just move to the downside very aggressively. You can see that we did get the retracement on the daily since we last spoke about this pair, and we are making moves to the downside once again. So if we do happen to get some sort of retracement once again and a nice and easy setup for the continuation of a move to the downside with TMCP1 using the strategy, that would be ideal. Now let's go over USD CAD. On USD CAD, we are continuing to make higher lows. So we're making higher lows out of this market, pushing to the upside. On the weekly, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively, but we have created a W formation where we would like to see the pattern complete at the neckline. So we've made a move down, move back up, move back down, move back up. We want to see a pattern complete at the neckline. If we drop down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are starting to reject and fail to create higher highs. So we are starting to make some sort of double top in this area where more bearishness is to be expected. And then after the bearishness, we should see a move to the upside for trend continuation. On NZD USD, if we do drop down to the monthly time frame, on the monthly, we are pushing down quite aggressively, retesting previous structure support. That should now act as support until we get a break below. So until we break below this candle and close below this candle, we are still in an area of indecision. So if we do drop down to the daily time frame and on the weekly, we are pushing down where we could see this M formation complete itself. We do have an M formation right around in here. Move up, move down, move up, move down. We want to see a completion at the neckline. If we drop down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are starting to reject this area down in here. Even though we did break below it, it is very unfortunate, but we need to see price breaking above this structure area before we start to look for moves to the upside for the weekly M formation to complete itself. Let's go down to USD CHF on USD Swiss franc from the monthly time frame. We have a perfect impulse to the upside coming back for the retracement, retesting previous structure resistance, now acting as support with a move to the upside. But on the monthly, we are retesting previous structure resistance. If we do look at it from a weekly time frame, we can see that we've just broken above all this structure, creating a W formation where we know we want to see the completion at the neckline. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are starting to create the beginning of an M formation on the daily, where if we do go ahead and get the W formation from the weekly to complete, we have an M formation on the daily where we know we want to see bullishness that could provide the possible move to the upside for a higher high to be completed and trend continuation. If we go down to USD JPY, on USD JPY, we are pushing to the upside very aggressively on the monthly. On the monthly, we've also created a W formation. Move down, move up, move down, move up. We know we want to see a completion at least at the 382 of the overall impulse, but at the neckline is ideal. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, we are quite overextended. If we do get some sort of retracement, then we could be in a possible situation where TMCP1 could be applied to this market. Going down to GBP NZD from the monthly time frame, if we do look at it on the monthly, we are rejecting previous structure support right in this area. If we drop down to the weekly, we are rejecting that area, as you can see in a little more detail, but we do have the setup of an impulse retracement and impulse to the downside very nicely, but we do have this structure area here. If we drop down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are starting to make some aggressive moves to the upside, where we could be in a situation where we have this left shoulder because we have some support here. We have a break below, an immediate break back into the area, and if we fail to break below the left shoulder, then we could see possible moves to the upside. So really want to see some breaks of structure before we start to look for any setups on this pair. We want to stay out of undecided markets as much as possible. If we go down to GBP CHF from the monthly time frame, we can see we are pushing down quite aggressively, but we are coming into these lows right around in here, a very, very strong area. On the weekly, we are pushing to the downside and we are a bit overextended, so some sort of retracement is due. And if we look on the daily time frame, you can see that we are making moves to the downside. Not very aggressive yet, but we are still making moves to the downside. We would need a break above some structures before we start to look for moves to the upside once again. On Euro NZD from the monthly time frame, we do have a head and shoulders, inverted head and shoulders pattern where we know we could see some more bullishness out of this area. If we drop down to the weekly time frame, on the weekly we do have structure support right in this area that we broke below, broke back above, and then we did use it as structure support once again, and we are starting to make moves to the upside on the weekly. If we look at it from the daily, it is very, very nice. We do have a nice and easy impulse to the upside coming back for the retracement, looking for the move and completion of the most common pattern in the market. The most common pattern in the market is an impulse, some sort of retracement, and another impulse to go ahead and complete. If we do look at it from a 4-hour time frame, we are entered into this trade running risk-free. Prices right now approaching and retesting previous structure resistance that should act as support on this side to help see further continuation to the upside. So good job for us. We are running this trade risk-free once again. Let's slide down to CHF JPY. If we do look at it from a monthly time frame, on the monthly we are pushing above structure, so very aggressively pushing on the weekly. We wanted to see the market break above all this structure and then come back for some sort of retracement. And if we look at it from the daily time frame, we are getting exactly that, where if we do get some sort of retracement, we can then look for the continuation to the upside. Oh, excuse me. If we look at it from the monthly time frame of Euro GBP, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively. We had this impulse, this retracement, and then we are starting this impulse to the upside once again. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, on the weekly we are approaching and retesting previous structure resistance that should act as resistance once again. And then we also have this W formation before the market breaks to the upside. We could see complete before the continuation of the market to the upside. But on the daily, we are starting to make what looks like to be the next impulse. We had the impulse, we had the retracement, we are starting the next impulse. Even before we look for any opportunities, we would need to see the market break above this structure area first before we could apply any of our strategies. But it could be likely that we see a move back down to the downside if this fails to create a higher high. Going down to AUD CAD on the monthly, like I said in the last one, we are setting up quite nicely for the most common pattern in the market, which is an impulse, a retracement, and some sort of impulse. So on the monthly, we are pushing to the downside quite aggressively. On the weekly, you can see that we're breaking below some structure. We had some structure support here. We had resistance and some consolidation all in this area. Then we had structure support once again over here. Now that we are starting to break below it, on the weekly, further continuation to the downside is expected. On the daily time frame, we do have a nice and easy break below structure. If we do get a nice and easy retracement, then a TMCP1 strategy can be applied for a further continuation to the downside on this pair. AUD CAD on the monthly time frame, we do have some structure support down in here, but we did come back and retest this level right in here. So we have a left shoulder, we have an M formation, we have the start of an M formation that failed to complete itself, so extreme bearishness, and then we have what looks like to be the start of the next impulse to the downside after this impulse retracement and impulse move on the weekly. So we could see further continuation to the downside on this pair from the weekly time frame. On the daily, if you do remember the last time we spoke about this pair, right around in this area, we wanted to see the market break above some structure before we started to look for buys. The market respected that area perfectly and started to plummet to the downside. Now with this impulse to the downside, if we do start to get some sort of retracement that fits our strategies, we then can look for the momentum to the downside with the TMCP1 strategy on AUD-CHF. If we go to GBP-JPY from the monthly time frame, we did say that we are coming into an area that is previous structure resistance that should now act as resistance once again. It did respect this and start to make a move to the downside, but with this monthly candle exploding to the upside, we are in a weird sort of impulse to the upside retracement impulse phase of the market. If we drop down to the weekly time frame, you can see that we last spoke about from this area, we wanted to see either a move to the upside breaking above all this structure or a more impulsive move to the downside with the retracement for further continuation. If we drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we got the impulse to the upside breaking above structure. If we do get a nice and easy retracement, then TMCP1 could be applied to this market for a further continuation to the upside. If we go over to AUD-NZD from the monthly time frame, pushing to the upside quite aggressively, starting the retracement on the monthly. On the weekly, we do have previous structure resistance now acting as support, which is lining up for the most common pattern in the market, an impulse or retracement back down to previous structure and an impulse from that area once again. If we do go down to the daily time frame, you can see that we were looking for a move to the upside breaking structure out of this area from our previous market breakdown, but market stayed below this area. And if we do get some sort of break above and then we get the retracement, we then can look for the continuation to the upside of AUD-NZD. Going down to CAD-JPY. CAD JPY from the monthly time frame is pushing to the upside quite aggressively. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, you can see that from the weekly we just completed this impulse retracement and impulse move to the upside. We got impulse retracement and impulse move to the upside, just completed that, so a retracement is expected. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we are a little bit overextended from the daily time frame, that if we do get some sort of retracement out of this area, a continuation to the upside could be possible. Dropping down to Euro CHF, on Euro CHF monthly time frame, we are coming into previous structure support that should act as support once again, and a rejection out of this area is possible. So if we look at it from a weekly time frame, we have this. You must be able to identify structure as well. We have this left shoulder, we have this head, and then we also have the right shoulder right here that the market is respecting by not breaking and closing below. So further bullishness could be expected from this market. If we look at it from a daily time frame, you can see that we are starting to get something quite interesting. We have a nice and easy impulse to the upside coming back for the retracement. We had some previous structure in this area that we wanted to see broken before we got the move to the upside once again. And if we look at it from a 4-hour time frame, we are waiting for this to go ahead and hit take profit. So there's a free signal for you if you are watching this live stream and this area has yet to be retested. Even if you watched a little late, I am looking for this move and this opportunity to the upside. If price triggers me in, I will be triggered and I will be riding this trade to go ahead and hit the take profit per the rules of the strategy. So free gift for whoever's watching. If we do go through Euro JPY from the monthly time frame, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively, looking to complete this most common pattern in the market, which is an impulse, some sort of retracement. We want to see the next impulse creating a higher high. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively, retesting these previous highs right now. It's been very bullish all week. USD or Euro JPY has. If we look at it from a daily time frame, from the daily, we are impulsing to the upside. And if we do get some sort of retracement out of this market, we could possibly see the continuation to the upside for a higher high to be created. Just the most common pattern in the market, keeping it basic and simple. If we look at Euro CAD from the monthly, same thing as we have noticed on most of the Euro pairs. They are correlating, so they will most likely start to look the same and act the same, behave the same in the market. So we do have previous structure support down in this area that should act as support once again, because we are above it, and that is from the monthly. We should see some sort of rejection to the upside. And if we look at EuroCAD, we did start to make some consolidation after this impulse. Then we moved to the downside, and we are starting to make moves to the upside. And then as well, we also have this candle here, which if you heard me speak about it, it's the next one we want to see fill in the wick with a long wick and a short body, but the body did close bullish. We want to see the next ones fill in the wick, and that's from the weekly time frame, so further bullishness is expected. If we look at it from the daily time frame, you can see that we're getting the same things that we always like to see: an impulse breaking above structure, coming back for the retracement, retesting previous structure resistance, now using it as support, and we just want to see a higher high created out of this area. If we look at it from the 4-hour time frame, you can see that we had previous structure support right in this area, and that if the market was going to stay below this area, we can no longer be looking for buy opportunities. But once the market broke above this area and became bullish and entering into bullish environment, we then could look for the movement to the upside, which is this trade right here. Once again, you get a free signal, 2 free signals on this live stream if you're paying attention and watching, man. What's up? Who's doing this out here? Nobody. But we have previous structure support right in this area, once, twice, broken down below, used as resistance once, twice, thrice, fourth-ice. And then we're just looking for another retest of this area to be used as support for the continuation to the upside. Let's go over AUD/JPY. On AUD/JPY, pushing to the upside quite aggressively. If we look at it from the weekly, on the weekly we are pushing above all this structure, which is exactly what we wanted to see. If we were to look back on the previous market breakdown, we wanted to see a break above all this structure before we got a retracement back down into it. If we look at it from the daily time frame, you can see that we broke above some structure here. So if we get a retracement back down into this area, it would be ideal for us to go ahead and look for a continuation to the upside. If we go over CAD CHF from the monthly time frame, on the monthly, we do have an impulse. We have a retracement. We have the start of the next impulse, but it is getting kind of weak and not showing signs of strength. So it could be a good possibility that the market wants to come back down and retest some of the lows first. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, you can see that we've had previous structure, resistance, and support right all in this area. Even if we extend it to the left, you can see previous structure, resistance, and support all in this area. Support, resistance, resistance, resistance. Really kind of disrespected manipulation. We are starting to get some resistance in this area as well. If we drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that this line seems to be the flip zone, as people like to call it. So once price stayed above this line, it was used as support. Once it broke to the downside, it was used as resistance. And that since we are getting rejections from this area right now and we are below it, if we get further continuation to the downside, we will be set up for a perfect M formation on the daily. We know the M formation wants to complete at the neckline, so we could be in an ideal situation to where we have a nice day trade. But as well, if the market does want to break above this area, we need to see a break above all this structure area right in here before we start to look for any opportunities like that. If we drop down to Euro AUD on the monthly time frame, on the monthly, last time we spoke about it, we spoke about a double bottom in this area where further continuation to the upside could be possible. And oh yeah, man, make sure you are watching these videos and following along on your own, so you can see that if you still have the markups from the last market breakdown, you can see that we were talking about double bottom out of this area. We want to see further continuation to the upside. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, from the weekly, we wanted to see some sort of retracement before we saw the continuation to the upside, which we also had this W formation, at least starting. If we look at it from the daily time frame, I think where we left off, we were coming down around in this area for these lows where we were getting the perfect break above structure. We're getting the retracement. We just want to see a higher high be created. Now we did take this trade, or I did take this trade myself. It was also sent in the signals, which is down in the description below if you would like to join that. But just simply going over it, same things I always say. We had a price break above all the structure. We wanted to wait until we had structure on our side before we started to look for buys. So price was making lower lows and lower highs, lower lows and lower highs, failed to create a lower low, created a higher high, breaking above structure. So we had previous structure resistance that should now act as support. We wanted to see that area be used as support before we saw the continuation to the upside, and it acted as support perfectly with the sniper entry, as a lot of people like to say. Then we had the explosion to the upside for 151 pips and a 3R take profit. Really nice. Toot my own horn one time. Now if we go to GBP AUD from the monthly, GBP AUD has just broke down to the downside, and we are starting to retrace. So not impulse to the upside, but we are starting the retracement. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, you can see that we pushed down to the downside and started the retracement right now. If we look at it from the daily time frame, from the daily is where it gets a little bit interesting, is that we've now broken above previous structure resistance, and it is acting as support. That could be a possibility to to where we could see this market explode to the upside just to follow the short-term trend continuation from the daily, even though the monthly we are starting the retracement. So we could fulfill the monthly retracement with the daily trend of creating higher highs and higher lows and see a move to the upside out of this market. On GBP CAD, if we look at it from the monthly time frame, we're just plummeting to the downside aggressively, very aggressively. If we look at it from the weekly, you can see that we just made this impulse to the downside, and some sort of retracement would be ideal to look for further continuation to the downside, and that's the weekly. On the daily, we are starting to get the retracement. It looks like we're looking to start the next impulse. If we drop down to the 4-hour time frame, you can see that we were looking for this trade. We had a nice and easy break below structure, come back for the retracement very perfectly, and then start the next move to the downside. If this 4-hour starts to make movements to the downside, we could see this market go ahead and complete the most common pattern in the market. But we are riding this risk-free. I don't know. Depending on your broker, you could be stopped out. My broker did not come back and stop me out. I am currently running this trade. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up. It is actually about 0.02% running in profit right now. And Euro NZD is running at about 2R. So moving right along, NZD CAD or NZD CHF, NZD CHF. Do we have any chats? Let me take a look. No. If you do want me to speak about something or go over something, or you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I will go over them once we get to the end. And if there are no questions, that will be the end of the live stream. So if we look at NZD Swiss franc from the monthly, we had monthly support in this area that is starting to act as resistance. We're starting to see the move to the downside from the monthly. On the weekly, you can see that this area right around in here, once we stayed above it, we stayed above it. Once we stayed below it, we stayed below it. We came back to retest that area and started to reject that area quite aggressively from the weekly. Last time we spoke about this market, from the previous market breakdown, we wanted to see the break above this area with a strong break and then a retracement before we started to look for buy opportunities. So we're setting our standards and setting our rules of what we would like to see before we get into trades. So that's a pro tip right there. But since then, price has started to make moves to the downside. If it does want to go ahead and clear all this structure area to the downside, if it comes back for a retracement and sets us up perfectly, we could see a possible move to the downside. And this is also setting up for a move to the upside, down, move up, come back, retest, breakdown. Real simple. We could see an overextended M formation where we could day trade this back up to the neckline and then look for a TMCP1 move to the downside. Excuse me. If we go over to NZD CAD, on NZD CAD, if we look at it from the monthly time frame, it's an NZD pair, so it's going to be showing some of the same things. They're all going to be correlated. We are moving to the downside. Previous structure resistance is getting rejected. We're making moves to the downside. But on the weekly, we are coming into previous structure support that should act as support once again, just like in this instance right here. Previous structure support came into it, acted as previous structure support, once again rejected that area. If we look at it from the daily time frame, as well on the weekly though, if we go back to the weekly, we are starting to break below some structure, but we would need to see a clear break below all this structure before it would be ideal for our setup. But if we look at the daily time frame, you can see we've came into this area and we're starting to reject. It could possibly create a double bottom where we could see a move to the upside from the daily time frame. But since we are below all this structure on the daily, we would first need to see a break above some structure before we started to look for buy opportunities. If we do go over NZD JPY, it is moving to the upside quite aggressively, breaking above some structure. If we go over to the weekly time frame, we can see that this weekly impulse retracement and impulse move is starting to complete itself. Impulse retracement is completing itself now. The most common pattern in the market If we look at it from a daily time frame, you can see that we are breaking above all this structure. And if we do get a retracement back down into some good areas and everything lines up perfectly, we can look for a TMCP1 to the upside on NZDJPY. Now going down to AUD SGD from the monthly, we are pushing to the downside quite aggressively. We are coming into previous structure, so previous structure support, where a bounce could be expected out of this area. But on the weekly, we are pushing to the downside, rejecting some previous resistance as well. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, let me clean this up a little bit. If we do drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we are creating and breaking structure to the downside. And with this new break of structure and this retracement, there could be a possibility that we see a continuation to the downside. Going down to USD PLN, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively on USD PLN. If we look at it from the weekly, we've came into previous structure resistance and we failed to create a higher high. So we could see more continuation to the downside with a weekly double top. If we look at the daily time frame, we can see we've created some sort of what could be a triple top in this area as well. We did have a nice and easy impulse to the upside, as we spoke about in the last market breakdown. We had a nice and easy impulse, a retracement, and we were right around this area where we wanted to see the market break above and then come back for the retracement before we saw the continuation to the upside. But the market came back for a retracement, but not just a retracement, breaking below the structure and now putting it in a situation to where you can no longer be looking for the move to the upside. If we go down to USD Thai Bet from the monthly, pushing up quite aggressively, it seems like all the USD pairs are starting their retracements as of now. On the weekly, retesting previous structure resistance that should now act as resistance until it is broken above. On the daily, you can see we came into this area and we started to reject this area. Nothing really important on this area. If we do get the retracement and then we start to see the next impulse happen, it could be a little bit more riskier, but this could be a possible trade as well to the upside. If we go down to Euro PLN from the monthly, Euro PLN, we are pushing to the upside, retesting previous structure resistance. That should now act as support in this area. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, you can see that we have previous structure resistance back here, broken to the upside. It's starting to act as support, and then we also have what could be a weird left shoulder with this supply and demand candle head right around this area. And then we do have the right shoulder that, unless broken and closed below this area, could provide possible continuation to the upside. If we drop down to Euro SEK on the monthly time frame, we do have a market that is starting to push to the upside quite aggressively. We do have a various change of hands. We had a push to the upside, the retracement. We wanted to see the next impulse. We failed to make the next impulse with this huge rejection candle right here. Extreme bearishness, but the next candle immediately exploded back up to the upside, showing the change back of hands. And then if we look at it from the weekly time frame, you can see we are retesting previous structure resistance that should act as resistance until broken above. If we look at it from the daily time frame, you can see that we are starting the impulse to the upside, and the retracement is starting now. If we do get the what would look like the next impulse and the setup perfectly from our strategies, we could look for a possible move to the upside. Next is USD SEK. On USD SEK on the monthly time frame, we are breaking above some structure, so we are showing some bullishness. From the weekly, we've just broken above some structure, previous structure resistance that should now act as support. If we do go down to the daily time frame, there is a possibility that even after all this consolidation at the highs right here, we could see some sort of retracement. Then we could see not necessarily an impulse, but a retry of these highs once again, and then the move to the downside. The market is struggling to make moves to the upside with high velocity and volatility. If we go over Euro SGD from the monthly time frame, we do have previous structure support right in this area that the market is currently in, where we could see a rejection to the upside. If we look at it from the weekly, we have previous structure support here that the market is starting to retest. If we go down to the daily, we are starting to get some higher lows created, where if we do get a push to the upside, then a possible retracement could provide a setup for the next impulse. If we do go down to USD SGD from the monthly, pushing to the upside quite aggressively, breaking above some structure. On the weekly, we are pushing to the upside, still continuing to retest previous structure resistance. On the daily right now, we do have an impulse right here. With this retracement, we could possibly get a TMCP to the upside. Dropping down to EuroZAR. On EuroZAR, on the monthly time frame, we are pushing to the upside, breaking above some structure. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, we are breaking above some structure as well. On the daily time frame, you can see that we had this weird retracement right in here that invalidated any setup that we could possibly have from our strategy standpoint, but it did provide the retracement and the continuation, the most common pattern in the market. If this market continues to break above some structure and come back for a retracement, then we then could look for a possible continuation to the upside. Going down to GBP DKK from the monthly time frame. On the monthly, we are pushing to the downside quite aggressively. On the weekly, you can see that we just broke below this structure, came back for a retest, and are pushing to the downside currently right now. If we look at it from the daily time frame, we wanted to see a little more retracement before we started to get the next impulse, but the market is right now currently testing previous structure lows, so we could see a possible double bottom out of this market. Further continuation is not to be looked for on this pair until we get a clear break below some structure. If we go to GBP NOK, on GBP NOK on the monthly time frame, you can see we've been trapped in between this resistance and this support for some time now, but we are retesting the bottom, and if we are retesting the bottom, we could create a possible double bottom where a rejection from this area could be possible. If we look at it from the daily time frame, you can see that we are starting to make higher lows out of this area, where if we do get a clear break above and then some sort of retracement, possible continuation to the upside could be looked for. SGD JPY pushing to the upside on the monthly quite aggressively. On the weekly, same thing. On the daily, a little bit overextended if we do get some sort of retracement, and then we can look for the continuation to the upside if this market does provide the correct things that we need. USD ZAR from the monthly pushing to the upside quite aggressively. On the weekly, we are above some structure, so we are above previous structure resistance that should now act as support. On the daily, we are above this area, starting to consolidate at the highs a little bit. We do have a possible W formation that was completed. So we had to move to the downside, move up, move down, move back up, and then we came back down and retest previous structure resistance. That should be now acting as support, and we are failing to break higher as well. But if we get a little deeper retracement, then there could be a possibility we could see, with this higher risk market, a possible move to the upside. GBP SEK from the monthly time frame, we are rejecting previous structure resistance that should now be acting as resistance once again, and we are starting to make moves to the downside. If we look at it from the weekly, you can see that we came into this area where we wanted to see the market break above what it could be a little left shoulder, head, immediate break back into the area, come back, retest the left shoulder, do not break and close above it. And then from there, you are set up for an impulse retracement and impulse move to the downside, which is what we could possibly be getting right now. On the daily time frame, we are breaking structure to the downside. And if we were to look for a setup on this market, a retracement and the proper rules satisfied could provide an entry. But if we were going to look for a possible move to the upside, we would need to see this market break above some daily structure first. If we look at GBP SGD from the monthly time frame, From the monthly, we're pushing to the downside quite aggressively. From the weekly, we are a bit overextended and we are in need of a correction. From the daily time frame, you can see we have some sort of double bottom in this area where we have one bottom here. Price did come down and reject from these lows, pushing to the upside. So more retracement could be possible if we do get some sort of retracement back up into this area right in here. And then we do have what would be the looks of the next impulse starting. We could see the continuation to the downside on GBP SGD. Going down to NOK SEK from the monthly time frame. On the monthly time frame, this is a pretty perfect monthly TMCP, the most common pattern in the market, where we have the impulse, the retracement, retesting previous structure, resistance, now turn support. We want to see the continuation to the upside, but currently we are rejecting the previous highs, and that is on the monthly. On the weekly, we are coming into this area where we do have down, up, down, up. We want to see this W formation complete itself. So a little more retracement could be possible from the weekly time frame. If we do look at the daily, you can see that we did push to the downside, had the retracement, and is starting what looks like to be the next impulse to the downside. So if we get a further correction down in this area and then we get another retracement, we then can look for a possible move to the downside on NOK SEK. But if we were going to look for the move to the upside, we would need to see some structure broken and created before we got in. NOK JPY from the monthly time frame, pushing to the upside, completing this impulse, retracement, impulse, most common pattern in the market on the monthly time frame. Further continuation to the upside is to be expected. We've broken above previous structure resistance. If we drop down to the daily time frame, you can see that we are completing this impulse, retracement, and impulse move to the upside. If we do get some sort of retracement out of here, we then can look for another continuation to the upside on this pair. USD NOK from the monthly time frame. From the monthly, we are breaking above some structure, breaking above resistance. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, you can see that we do have a move down, move up, move down, move up, where we are starting to complete this W formation. It is looking to complete itself from the weekly time frame. If we look at it from the daily time frame, we do have an impulse right here where if we do get the correction, we can look for the continuation to the upside. Going down to Euro NOK from the monthly time frame. On the monthly, we have this inverted head and shoulders right in this area where we could see a further continuation to the upside. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, we are starting to make moves to the upside, breaking above some structure. So structure support and resistance right in this area, starting to break and close above and retest that area. If we look at it from a daily time frame, we can see that we did have an impulse to the upside, creating the most common pattern in the market where there could be a possible continuation to the upside on this pair. It is quite interesting. USD CNH from the monthly time frame, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively. We are in due of a retracement. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, a bit overextended to the upside, a retracement is due. And if we look at it from the daily time frame, you can see that on the daily we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively. Well, if we do get some sort of retracement back down in this area, further continuation to the upside could be possible. USD CZK from the monthly time frame, pushing to the upside quite aggressively. On the weekly, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively. We are completing this impulse, retracement, impulse move right here, the most common pattern in the market. We are starting to retrace a little bit, and if we look at it from a daily time frame, we are rejecting some of these highs in here. So this resistance area is acting as resistance until it is broken. But from here, we can expect that if we do get the double top, we then can expect further continuation to the downside, for the M pattern to create itself and then complete itself. And once it is completing itself, it should provide further continuation to the upside for some higher highs to be created. Just watch out for that. Now that we slide down to USD DKK from the monthly time frame, we are pushing to the upside quite aggressively on the weekly. We are approaching previous structure resistance, and we are currently rejecting it. From the daily time frame, you can see we started to make the next impulse to the upside, but we were failing to make that. We would still need to see a break above structure before we start to look for longing opportunities. But since this market is starting to make moves to the downside, it could be one that just sits on the sideline. USD HUF from the monthly time frame, we are making moves to the upside quite aggressively, looking to start the retracement now. From the weekly time frame, we are pushing up quite aggressively. We were pushing up quite aggressively, and we're starting the retracement now. We are retesting previous structure resistance that should now be acting as support. And once again, we do have 2 days until this candle closes, so the way that it is now may not be the way that it closes. But if we look at it from the monthly or from the daily time frame, we had this M formation that completed itself. Move up, move down, move up, move down, came back to the neckline, completed at the neckline, which put us in perfect situation for an impulse retracement, an impulse move to the downside. So this market could see further continuation to the downside. And if we go over USD Mexican peso, on USD Mexican peso, we're still trapped in between this consolidation horizontal moving area. If we look at it from the weekly time frame, from the weekly, last time we spoke about it, we were right around this support area where we could see a move to the upside. On the daily time frame, last time we were speaking about it, we had just made moves to the downside and created this M formation. So we had this move up, this move down, and just exactly how I said the market may come back to complete at the neckline. We got exactly that, and then it puts us in a continuation move to the downside for the most common pattern in the market. But at this moment, I wouldn't be looking for anything on USD Mexican peso. So if we have anything in the chat, let me check the chat. I don't see anything. I appreciate the like, whoever dropped the like. No, you got no chats, no chats. Okay, that's it. We'll be back on Friday, somewhere around market close, so in between 5:30 and 6:30. Once again, I'll be hopping on here. I would gladly appreciate it if you joined. If you have any questions about trading, I'll be happy to answer them. If you want to join the program and learn how to take the trades that I take, or get in and understand what I'm doing when I go through this market breakdown to say we're going to take a TMCP1 or a TMCP2 or a DP1 trade on this, if it sets up perfectly with the rules and everything that we use for the strategies, you can check the link in the description. But other than that, I appreciate everybody that has viewed this, and we'll see you on Friday. Hope you have a profitable day on and off the charts.